Greetings, everybody. It's me, Marcel Williams, again. Marcel Williams Take. Firstly, I want to just say thank you to everybody who have opened and read and followed the last post. I was very thrilled at the many responses that I received, and it's very encouraging for me going forward. There's such a lot to talk about, the presidential election campaign of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and just very recently the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Pence. But as promised, I want to talk about earthquakes, because the last time I spoke about earthquakes, you'll remember that I brought up the point about beautiful Cape Town having had a few earthquakes and tremors, not so strong, but I would say a bit of a wake-up call that these things are possible. And I pointed out that Cape Town is relatively safe, but we never know. People need to be prepared for anything. Jesus Christ said that we will have earthquakes and famines in various places. There you'll find it in the book of Matthew in the New Testament, chapter 24, verse 7. And interestingly enough, Luke, in the book of Luke, chapter 21, verse 11, he also adds famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. You've been well acquainted with bird flu, mad cow disease, swine flu, and various other modern diseases have doing the rounds. But recently, 2020, we've been all very affected by the pandemic, COVID-19. So that's an indicator for us also that the Lord Jesus Christ has said something about these things that are happening in our time. But back to earthquakes. Do you know there's always been earthquakes? And the people who want to debunk this idea will always say, oh, there's always been earthquakes. But there's something that's been said about it. Jesus Christ said there in Matthew 24:8 that all these things will happen, but it has to happen. It's the beginning of birth pains. And we all know that, especially women, would know that after 9 months of pregnancy, the baby must be born. And usually this happens with birth pains that happens before the actual birth. These pains come in the form of contractions, and in the beginning of the birth pains, the contractions are far apart and there's a gap between them. But the closer the woman gets to the actual delivery, the contraction pains happen more frequently. The gap between each contraction is shorter, and this happens, it gets closer and closer, shorter and shorter, until there is one continuous pain where the baby is then delivered. So in a similar way, I think Jesus Christ was teaching us that earthquakes have always happened, but as we get closer to a certain period, a certain time, they become more frequent and the gap between them becomes closer. And observation tells us, if we've been watching the news, that before, years back, there were decades between big earthquakes and various earthquakes. But in frequency, there's an increase, and there is a lesser gap between earthquakes, to the point where it's been every year, then it's almost every month or every week in some places. And the words there were in various places, so they're not in one particular place, but all over the earth. There's different countries that have experienced earthquakes. So this indicates that the time is near, and it's gradually getting nearer. It is commonly referred to as the end times. But take note, It's not the end of times, like some people would want to say. It's the end times that we're referring to. I will talk about Matthew 24 and some of the other things said there at another time. But just remember, if you have not done so yet, please commit yourself to the Lord Jesus Christ for your salvation. Remember the words in the Bible, in several books or scriptures, it says there, all who have called on the name of the Lord shall be saved. So stay safe, stay well, be blessed. Until next time.